y'all, it's Jeremy James, the Bourbon Realtor.
Lahannah Bonagofsky.
We're Copper and Oak. Did you hear that? Oh my gosh.
We are not a Copper and Oak.
We are not.
Please do not scare me like that.
We're Barstools Bourbon. Today we have, and I have been told I have to enunciate this correctly, the Alan Bishop here on location in French Lick, Indiana, visiting with the wonderful people at Spirits of French Lick. So we'll join you in just a second.
Hey guys, welcome back.
She does not talk with her hands.
Look,
I noticed you get down here very.
it's a nervous thing. I can start moving. Like, what are we? Okay, I'll be like Jeremy. Are you ready? But watch
Don't
out.
knock the bottles over.
Hey guys, welcome back to Barstools and Bourbon, or I could just be normal.
You're never normal.
Like,
It's not happening.
we're really excited to be up here at French Lick. As soon as we walked in, I was like, that smell.
Yes.
That smell, because as you can see, this beautiful scenery behind us, all the bourbon wrecks, pretty excited about this.
Love it. The one thing we've noticed as we were sitting here is we've been here for, I don't know, for longer, whatever, because Graham takes forever. He's been ready for a half an hour, but it's all right. The one thing we've noticed is sitting here is it doesn't smell like your normal rick house. It smells much heavier chocolatey.
It's way sweeter on the nose.
Way sweeter on the nose than what I'm used to.
Yeah, chocolatey and fruity, and this warehouse in particular. I mean, it's 1,200 barrels of double pot distilled, mostly bourbon, but there's also a bunch of brandy in here too. So
Okay.
right here where we're at, you're sitting by some tequila barrel apple brandy, which is contributing some nice aroma to the situation.
I like the sign. I mean, the first thing I noticed when I walked in was the sign, which was, I don't care about your opinion about what's in this barrel. It's mine. Stay out of it.
That's right. That's right.
That's a beautiful, I was like, yes, that's exactly right. So, well, y'all, I want to thank you for joining us here as we just dive into so much of what you all have going with Spirits of French Lick. I got introduced to your all's products through a friend of the show, what I call our official bourbon procurement officer. I don't pay him a thing. I've had to raise his salary 4 times. And he said, dude, you need to start checking out Maddie Gladden. And I'm like, oh, all right. And he's like, no, they're craft, but they're doing amazing work. And I was like, oh, okay, fine. So I picked up the Steelbach Maddie Gladden, the Steelbach pick. And the first time I had it was on the bourbon tournament that we're doing. And I was blown away. Unfortunately, it happened to be right next to Elijah Craig B520 on the opening round, and it lost by like a point. But that B520 was probably the best thing that Elijah Craig put out last year. Right.
I would absolutely agree with that.
Yep. So I've been very impressed with what you're working with, and you've got a mad scientist vibe that I absolutely love. You don't even call yourself master distiller; it's head alchemist, right? Or master alchemist?
Head alchemist, but it's just if you're going to be pretentious, then you got to go all the way. You know what I mean? So it's either distiller, and then there's no marketing behind that, or if marketing wants to use master distiller, then I'm gonna be like, no, you can't do that, and then I'm gonna be a complete asshole and say, well, I'm just gonna be a head alchemist. So.
I like it. I like it.
Can I be like head alky?
There you go.
There's not much difference, truth. They're right on the line.
I can't do it. Close. You do it. I'll drink it.
That's the one thing that I love. As I've gotten into bourbon more, I love that creative streak and the experimental barrels. I'm always like, oh, dude, you have something experimental you want me to try? Absolutely, for that. And Pat, I texted him the other day. I was picking up some barrel char to do some barbecue smoking. And as I pull up, he comes out with this bag, and he's got this Glencairn. And he goes, dude, try this. Well, anytime a master distiller or whatever, Pat Heist hands you a glass and said, dude, you need to try this, you try it. I don't care what you're doing. And it was one of those creative things that was phenomenal. So tell us a little bit about what you've got going on. We've got 5 of your expressions here in front of us, a pretty wide range. And I guess we'll just work from the Maddie down to the right way, right?
Yeah, works for me. That's the best way to do it. So yeah, I mean, this is what we do. So everything we do here is kind of based on the history of Southern Indiana and the distilling complex that was here. And we base everything on the local spirits as well. So the spirits of the people and the places. So I always say it's not just about the spirits in the bottle, but the spirits of the local place. And so everything here is part of a wider story and part of a much older distilling tradition here in southern Indiana in particular, especially in what they called the Black Forest region, where there was a ton of bourbon made prior to Prohibition, and we were actually the apple brandy capital of the world. So,
Nice.
the Maddie Gladden is our first high rye bourbon that we rolled out with. So we went the opposite direction of a lot of the newer craft distillers because, listen, we're on the wrong side of the river, right?
Yep.
The river's magic. Nothing good can happen on this side of it. So, all these younger distillers are coming out with 2-year-old ryes. They're coming out with, high rye bourbon immediately. The first two things we came out with were both wheated bourbons. So, and they were 2 years old when they started. And I told people, hey, if you like rye, I got stuff coming for you too. Just give me a minute.
Right.
So we finally got there. And so everything you'll see from us pretty much is a differentiated mash bill. So 55 corn, 35 rye, 10 malt, and we use a lot of different brewers malts.
Nice.
So we used Victory malt on that particular product. Double pot distilled, no chill filtration on anything we do whatsoever. Number 2 charred oak barrels, 53 gallon and larger. We don't use any small barrels whatsoever. We don't use any cheats whatsoever, as I call it. We don't even make any liqueurs here. So we make straight bourbon whiskey.
Okay, I like that as far as the packaging goes and all this. I love the label that each one tells
Yeah,
a
tells
small little story. And your all's website was the same because I was like looking that up, how it gives a little bit of history behind it all.
I always tell people it's like necromancy, right? So there's more than enough marketing going on in the world of spirits. Yeah.
All right.
So I'm a historian at heart, a music lover. So anywhere the crossroads of music, alcohol, and history come together with agriculture, that's where you're going to find me at. So Maddie Gladden is a good example. Lee Sinclair is a good example. William Dalton, etc. But I could write 15 pages on any of these characters, and 5 or 6 people are going to read them, and nobody else is ever going to care. But if I suddenly tell you the story of Maddie Gladden, and it's a crazy story about a very independent woman who owned a brothel and shot one of her ex-husbands, married him again a year later, etc.
I want to be friends with her.
Then I can bring her back to life, right? Because, nobody in New Orleans knew who Maddie Gladden was, 2 years ago, but now they do. Now they're saying her name. She's alive again. She's there. She exists. And now they're interested. And there's a story that is verifiable and real that you can look into while you drink and become a little bit more acquainted with that character.
Well, and you guys got massive shout out from Fred Minnick.
Yes.
A month or two ago? He said best bourbon, best whiskey outside of Kentucky.
Yes.
So Michael Veach was recently shouting you all out too, which is huge.
Yep.
That was massive. That the clout just pulling from Minnick's quote, because I was already into the Maddie, and so I was like, I'm going to do my hipster thing. I knew it before it was cool. But once we saw that, Ralph and I basically just looked at each other and said, I don't care what you have to do. You go grab it now because it's going to disappear.
If Veach or Minnick say it, then...
Yep.
The Lee moved overnight with Veach, or with Minnick. I've never seen anybody, and I've known Minnick and Veach and all those guys for years, Tom Fisher. But I've never seen anybody move the needle on a product like that. I mean, it was overnight gone, and we literally just finished up bottling the second batch of it. I've never seen anything like that before, and I give Minnick hell about it sometimes because he and I have known each other for so long. We can kind of pick on each other back and forth, and so if he's about to talk about one of our products or say something about it, he won't tell me what he's going to say, and he won't tell me if it's going to get or good reviews. Just you got to watch. He's completely honest about it.
Right.
Yeah.
So I told him, I was like, I figured this out, Fred. You don't even like me. You don't even like the products. You're just trying to give me a damn heart attack. That's what you're just trying to kill me while I'm watching the live stream. He's over there doing his blind tasting notes, and every time he says something negative, I'm like, Fred doesn't know what the hell he's talking about. And it never ends up being my product. So I'm like,
maybe
Maybe he does.
Eventually he's just gonna destroy something that we send him. But
So
okay.
I loved it whenever the pandemic first hit, and so he was doing the series of your local liquor store whiskeys. I found all these under 25. Here's the 30, 40. Like in Copper and Oak in our restaurant, sports was over. You would have thought we were watching horse racing. We had all these people sitting there, and we're like, okay, was that one? Wait, was that K? No, I think K is going to beat this. And we're trying to pick out which whiskey it was. He keeps us entertained.
Talk us through Maddie a little bit about we talked about what's on the glass. Now let's talk about what's in the glass.
So again, like with all of our products, double pot distilled. So this is a unique mash bill, as I mentioned a while ago. Very differentiated. There's a Four Roses mash bill that's fairly close, but we wanted to come at it. If you're going to make a high rye bourbon, there's debate about what a high rye is. You know, to me, if I'm going to call it a high rye, it's going to be 30% or higher rye.
Right.
It has to be, in my opinion. Or what's the point in calling it a high rye, right? So this is 2 fermentations. We have 1,200 gallon fermenter, 600 gallon cooker. So that actually plays into our flavor profile. So we do 2 different cooks to fill 1 fermenter. And as we do that, we're using 2 different yeast strains. So day 1, we're using the yeast strain that we pulled from the atmosphere here in the distillery, our house strain that gives us our house character, that kind of eucalyptus sort of flavor you get on the finish. Yep. That sort of menthol thing that runs across a lot of our products. And then day 2, we'll use 1 of 3 different brandy yeasts depending on the product. And the reason for that brandy yeast is to pull out those really fruity flavor profiles, bring that stone fruit to the forefront. And then we also distill this a little bit differently. So I'm big on mouthfeel. I love mouthfeel in whiskeys.
Thank you. That was the first thing I noticed.
Yeah, I don't care how high proof it is, but if it doesn't have the mouthfeel, then it's pointless. There's no reason for it. And with pot stilled whiskey in particular, that mouthfeel is incredibly important. Pot stills are all about retention and concentration of flavor, but you need that mouthfeel to go with it. So when we run Maddie, we do a double pot still distillation, stripping run, take all the alcohol off of the fermented beer, take that alcohol and then run it back through one of the 2 doubling stills, either Sophia or Anana. When we run Maddie, we actually run a slightly different vapor path than we would if we run W Sinclair, which we'll talk about momentarily. So on Maddie, we literally go straight from the pot still to the condenser, nothing in between, and we actually cut into the tails just a slight little bit. And the reason for that is we want those oils from those tails.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that's why, like, when you drink Maddie, you notice on the finish, even several seconds after you swallowed, that kind of oily character comes back on the palate, and you start to taste it again on the palate. It's almost like a little magic trick that's going on there.
For me, that's one of the biggest things about bourbon. I can have a bourbon that has wonderful flavor and everything else, but lose points for me on mouthfeel. Mm-hmm. If it comes across very thin and very watery. One of the things, and I know it gets too much hype, and it's good, but OWA, whenever you're drinking it, it just has that buttery, thick mouthfeel that you can put next to a dozen 107 7 years, and they're not going to have. Right. And that's the thing I love about this, and what stood out even in that tasting on our tournament was that it was, especially at barrel proof, that mouthfeel is just soft and velvet. Yep. I mean, it is just gorgeous. And for me, because you start talking, I mean, a lot of the stuff starts kind of getting really close together with notes. I mean, how many times can you say oak, caramel, and vanilla? Right. And if, after a while, you just stop using the words. But when that mouthfeel plays in, and then you start getting that butteriness and everything else, it's just awesome. And the other thing I think you guys notice with these distillations as well. So our motto is respect the grain. And the idea
it's on the bottle here.
Yeah, the idea there is that grain has terroir in the same way that grapes do. So. We do more of a blend and balance of things, right? So instead of like focusing on just exclusively that caramel, vanilla, those typical Kentucky bourbon flavors, and I love Kentucky bourbon, obviously, but it's a very narrow spectrum. You know, it used to be before Prohibition, there were a million different styles of bourbon, and it got down to, 6 or 7 big guys making very similar product. Right. So what we do is more of a blend and balance. We want 50% raw material, fermentation, and distillation with 50% maturation. So you can taste the grains in here, the positive aspects of the grain. There's not anything that's off or fault in distillation whatsoever. But we want you, if we're going to say that we're using a specific grain in a mash bill, I want you to taste the positive aspects of that grain alongside the barrel. And so we get a lot of fun interplay between what's happening with the barrel and what happened with the distillation with the grain that I think that gets missed out on a lot in American distilling. And
what's your rye count on the Maddie again?
35.
It's interesting because it's such a high rye count. You don't end up with that real piney flavor that I normally would expect from a much higher percentage.
No, there's some herbal notes, but it's not even like as peppery as I would have expected it to be, being the 35%. Like you were saying, like there's so much more fruit. Like on the nose, it was 100%. I was like, oh, that's fruity. Yeah. It's very bright.
People always have this thing with rye too, where they immediately go to rye spice, because that's what we think of because those 6 or 7 big distilleries, right? Rye itself as a grain in distillation isn't spicy. It's the yeast that pushes it in that direction. Really? It's really the yeast more than anything. And Pat Heist probably agree with me on that. I don't know. He may punch me in the face next time I see him for saying
We'll
that.
check with Pat Heist.
But honestly though, that's what I like with Wilderness, their rye whiskey, it's more on the herbally side of it, not the spicy, which is one reason I think that it's taking off the way that it is.
Yeah.
Because it's kind of breaking what the norm is for rye.
And we treat our rye grain differently too when we get it in than we do any other grain. Rye is the aromatics of rye are super important as far as I'm concerned. So we don't treat it like we do the other grains where we're looking at bushel weight and we're looking at those sort of, whether the starch qualities to be able to give us the yield that we want. We're looking at it like, what does it smell like? It can be, half the size of other rye grains, but if it has the aroma we're after, we treat it like a botanical, and that's how we approach it.
Nice. Well, I would be hard pressed to even call that, like you said, a classic high rye bourbon.
It's not.
On palate, it tastes a lot like Horse Soldier. Their barrel proof is wheated, but it doesn't drink like a wheated bourbon at all. It drinks much more like a blend, like a rye or four grain, than a true wheated bourbon. And that's where I think you're getting a little bit of that crossover moving in I guess that other direction, away from those classic green rye spices, than what you get. And it's a beautiful sip. It really is.
And I normally speak my mind on like all things, and my tagline.
That's a surprise.
That's a surprise. My tagline is, it's different. That means I didn't like it. Like I'll go back and I'll look at like things we said, and I was like, it's different.
Yeah, it's
like,
interesting.
I love this, and that's
Our
a
accents
genuine.
are interesting too.
This one's not different. This one is different in a good way, and I love this way.
Good.
Yeah.
Well, what's interesting about that one for me too is just like the real woman. I'm not allowed to take that one home anymore, so that one gets me into trouble because I don't realize how much of it I'm drinking over time. So.
It drinks nicely. I had an initial first sip. I had a little bit of hug. The rest of the time, it's just nice and warm in the mouth.
Well, I'm not pouring the next pour because you see what I just did there.
Yeah, it was a bit heavy.
I was like, geez, I thought I was at home. You said you don't realize how much you drink. I'll be at home and I'm like, where do you properly fill your Glencairn? Like, if I fill it here, I don't have to go back.
You ever wake up the next morning after drinking? Because I do this sometimes. You wake up and wherever you put your bottle at, right? You walk back out and you don't feel that bad, and then you walk around the corner and you see the bottle, you see how much you drank, and you just immediately like it hits you like, oh, you're an idiot.
Yep.
What's wrong with you?
Yes.
What's your problem?
Yes, I do.
You opened that bottle?
Right.
It's crazy when you don't realize because, especially people like us who drink whiskey neat, like first couple sips, they go down a little bit slower. Then I'm the high proof rye person.
Oh, yeah.
So it just starts going down like water, it gets to the point, like if I go to bars, I have to get like a bourbon and ginger ale or something like that because if I start whiskey neat, it's gone.
Yep. Done. Finished.
Gone.
Yep.
Every time.
Well, and all my bourbon friends can confirm this. They can tell when I'm drinking because they start getting playlists from YouTube. So. You hear this song?
I like it.
Like this one?
I start texting random people. It's like, dude, have you tried such and such? And they're like, dude, stop.
Just stop. Right. It's Wednesday. Go to bed.
It's 2 a.m. Shut up.
Hey, but see, Monday, Tuesday, that's my Saturday, Sunday. So it's like this going thing. There's this standing party at my house every Monday during the summer. And Tuesday morning, I'm like, oh.
All right, so introduce us to Lee W. Sinclair.
All right, yeah. So all these stories are very long, and I'll give you a little background on them, but without going too deep. So Sinclair was a resident of Washington County, which is where I'm from. I'm from Pekin, Indiana. Sinclair lived in Salem, Indiana most of his life. He was the son of a very prominent Chicago textile mill owner. He started his own textile mill in Salem, Indiana in the 1860s, moved down here with his wife, pursued all types of business endeavors. He became a banker. He was the president of the New Albany and Salem state banks, respectively. And then he got turned on over here to French Lick, West Baden. Basically, there had always been this history of like the groundwater here, being medicinal in nature because it's very mineral in nature. And so there were always these health spas here. So he bought one, ran it for a year or two, it burned down. The only thing that Sinclair loved more than business in his life was his daughter Lillian. And he wanted to get out of the business when the hotel burnt down, and she talked him into getting back into it. So he decided if he's going to do it, he's going to do it right. He built the what he advertised as the Carlsbad of America, also the America's first fireproof hotel, which is the West Baden Dome and Resort now. And with that came gambling. So he brought in the first casino. So eventually, by the 1920s, there were 9 hotels and casinos here. None of the casinos were ever legal until the one that's here now. That brought in a lot of gangsters, a lot of moonshining, a lot of illicit liquor moving. But we're on Sinclair Street. We're right across from the West Baden Dome and Hotel, and it made sense for us that the very first, bourbon that would be our flagship would be W Sinclair. This actually comes from my background as a home distiller, which is the new politically correct way to say moonshiner.
We're in Kentucky. You're fine.
Right.
You can be a moonshiner. Right. We've got all the uncles and grandfathers with their stills in their backyard.
I love it when people come to me with
Here, drink
clear
this. Woo.
mason jars. I'm like, hello.
Well, this is what led to me getting into the industry legally, because this was created in my backyard when I was 15. My dad and my grandpa helped me build a little 10-gallon still, and I grew up around it, right? But they wouldn't tell me how to do anything. So they refused to tell me how to do anything. The rules
you take
were,
it to school or something.
Yeah, don't blow your ass up in the backyard and bring us something that's worth drinking. Those were the rules, literally.
I like it. Those are good rules. What was it? Don't blow your ass up and bring us something worth drinking.
Yes, yeah.
Hey,
because they were all making sugar shine, right? They weren't making grain whiskeys. They were making sugar shine and apple brandy. That was their thing. So I knew what they did. So this is 60% corn, 17 wheat, 13% oats, and 10% caramel malt. Oats, I found out a little later on, had a very long history in distillation, even in bourbon. They were very popular in bourbon up until industrialization in the 1870s. I didn't know that when I was 15. I threw them in there because I was like, well, oats are grain. Why can't I just throw oats in there? It worked out really well.
I guarantee you that's how it all started anyways.
Right.
That long history started with some guy going, dude, we got oats.
None of these guys, as a historian, I will tell you, none of these guys who have a magic family mash bill had that mash bill from the get-go.
Right.
Farm distillers were distilling whatever the hell they could get a hold of, whenever they could get a hold of it to make what they were making. They might have had preferences, but
it's how you stored your grain long term, anyways.
Right.
I mean, you can't keep it forever. So how do you prolong it? You bottle it, and then you can sell it, use it as currency or whatever else you need to do. I mean, that's the whole thing about whiskey distillation to begin with. It's how you keep your corn.
It is. It's a form of preservation. Distillation is inherently agricultural, and that's something that we have forgotten in this country, and that we should remember for sure. Especially with craft distillers, the biggest thing a craft distiller should be is a representation of their local food shed and watershed.
I like it.
In all honesty.
That one's a bottled and bond. I didn't know that.
Yeah, through everything from here on out with the bourbons will all be bottled and bond, or unless it's a single barrel or a cask strength or something like that. But our goal has always been to get the bottled and bond, because I feel like it still has some heft and it shows that the distiller at the very least is interested in letting those products get to an age that's respectable to
it takes
mainstream drinkers.
Patience and resilience to put out bottled and bond products.
For me, the bottled and bond is the flex, because somebody can pull off a great barrel and win whiskey of the year. Coming up with a reproducible product year in, season out at the same level, with that level of consistency, says, I know what the hell I'm doing when I step in front of this mash bill, in front of this still, and what I'm doing with aging. So for me, the bottom bond is the flex, because it's one distilling season, it's one distillery, it's no blends, it's just stripped down. This is you.
Right.
And that's what I like about it.
I've been making that recipe for 18 years now, so I would surely hope I have.
So I can see your fingerprints in the glass.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So talk us through taste profile here.
So the oats on this are super important. So it's a very small amount of oats, 13%. So basically think of it as modified wheated bourbon. So it's going to be sweeter. It's going to be rounder. It's going to be a little more approachable. It's not like a traditional wheated. There's definitely some other notes in there. There's some honey. There's obviously a lot of caramel, but the caramel did not come from the barrel. It came from brewer's malt. It came from caramel malt.
Nice.
We use the barrel for other things. If we need caramel malt, or any of those brewer's malts, that's where we go to. Certainly a lot sweeter, a little bit of like apricot sort of stone fruit on it. Not so much black cherry like you had on the Maddie Gladden, but that apricot, that lighter sort of characteristic, like a white stone fruit, is certainly there. The mouthfeel for me on this is there too. That actually comes from the oats. The oats have a lot of long chain fatty acids that in pot still distillation come across fantastically. So you get that kind of creamy mouthfeel that just lingers and hangs out. Really easy drinker. I'm going to tell on myself, I get in trouble for bringing Maddie home, but somehow I stay more sober when I drink this one, but I drink more of it because it's a little lighter and it hasn't got caught on to yet. So it will now. She's going to see it and she's going to be like,
now she's going to be
Can we cut that part?
It's gone.
Okay.
Doesn't exist.
Little warmer mouthfeel on the finish with it as well. And is that just proof sitting on it, or?
It's a little bit more of that ethanol background being able to push through because you're dealing with lighter grains, you're dealing with that wheat. There's also with that wheat, you get a little bit of that kind of cream cheese icing sort of thing going on, and some of that earthy sort of profile that's going on there too. This one by far is still my absolute favorite. Still love that one.
That's nice.
I'm a pretty big fan of this one.
We're also a big fan of another 4-grainer, Frey Ranch. And
Huge fan of
Yeah.
so the
Their
4
barrel
grains are
strength.
really starting to get a name for themselves, and start pushing through the rye and wheated world, and really start stepping up. So I think this is a time for Lee Sinclair to really step out there and be made known.
I think so too. And in the future, there is going to be another version of this that has existed since I was a kid too. So I mentioned Lee's daughter, Lillian. There is a Lillian Sinclair setting in barrels right now that'll be a bottled and bond in a couple of years.
Nice.
And basically same mash bill, but we switch out the wheat for rye. So you get a lot of that like snickerdoodle cookie sort of characteristic coming through. And then we harvested a yeast from the lagering cave at Earthbound Brewing in St. Louis and brought that back and cultured it and used that as sort of a little love letter to St. Louis.